So, as I said, my second topic will be Settlers of Catan. Now, um, I know that a lot of the people that will be watching this, at least in the immediate future, will probably have played Catan simply because most of my friend base has. But if you notice anything that I'm forgetting, please let me know or bring it up, and I will be sure to maybe add an annotation in. Or if you are watching live, that's even better. I can actually answer that in the immediately when I see the question. I see someone putting a lot of question marks, and the question is Jono. Um, yes. Okay. So I'm going to be explaining Settlers of Catan. If you've never played this game, it's a staple of college society, and although a lot of people at college probably haven't played it, so they don't know it's a staple. But I'm going to start by drawing a small section of the board. One of the interesting things with Settlers of Catan is that it is a randomizable board. Now, there are configurations that are suggested by the rulebook, but it allows some creativity when setting up the board, which and also some randomization, which allows it to not necessarily get as dry as some older games, some older, more classic games like Monopoly and like Risk may get. Um, so you'll notice that these are all hexagons. The physical shape isn't too important, but it does allow for an interesting concept because when you have perfect hexagons, unlike the ones I've drawn here, they fit perfectly together into a somewhat hexagonal shape when you have enough of them. And that's what the original Catan board looks like. It's a large hexagon made out of smaller hexagons. So each of these hexagons will be textured with a different texture. So I'm going to color in some of these. And so we'll have light green, dark green. I'm going to go with orange. And then go with gray. Okay. And so there's also going to be another one. I should probably just draw another hexagon. Try and remedy this terrible one I drew a couple seconds ago. And this one will be yellow. And then I'm just going to color um, the background tan for now, just because that makes one more hexagon I don't have to draw. So okay, so these hexagons, I'm just going to start out by explaining their names. So this is the plains, or you could call it sheep. So I'm just going to write sheep. Sorry, writing in tan on light green isn't the best idea. So this is plains, I guess. So these are like biomes. So this would be a forest, and this is a field, I guess. And then a mountain. And I'm not sure what biome clay would come from. I guess maybe a mesa. I don't know. Um, and then this is desert. Making sure I don't put too many S's in there. Okay, so um, Settlers of Catan. First off, you build the board, and like I said, you can randomize the board each time. Sometimes people will follow the suggested configurations just because it allows for more um, spread out resources, or maybe you want clumped together resources, so you'll uh, do that on purpose. I've seen people make configurations that they just kind of build together because it looks nice. You can do it whatever you want, which is kind of nice about it. So each of these biomes provides a commodity, and so there's going to be a lot of things that don't make sense initially, and then I'll explain them more. So, like I was saying, the plains give you sheep, the forest gives you wood. There's a lot of jokes that are made when people say they get wood, so a lot of people choose to call this lumber or logs. But you can choose, a lot of people tend to just say wood because the jokes tend to ease up the crowd before they get into the gameplay. The field provides wheat or grain. Now, if I'm writing more than one thing in each individual section, that's all the same thing in the sense of the game. So it's not like one particular biome gives you more in a sense. The mountains give you ore. Some people call these rocks. They definitely look like rocks on the card in the game. And so this mesa, this is a clay biome. Um, Clay, and some people call this bricks because this is the form that the clay is in on the picture on the card. So there is another biome in the initial version of Settlers of Catan, which is a desert. The desert gives you nothing, and so there's some important things in the start about the desert, but I will get to those when we get to those. So these are the biomes. And so I just wanted to give a visualization of what the board kind of looks like. You can imagine another hexagon here, another hexagon here, and then expanded one more layer out. And that is the full giant hexagon that the board is made up into. Okay, so I'm going to clean the slate here. And so I need to explain some things about the board. So on the board, there is going to be, I'm just going to draw 3 hexagons to keep things simple. And so we have this one, and then we have one more down here. And so there is one juncture where all 3 of them meet. And so this is important. So I'm just going to arbitrarily pick colors. It doesn't really matter about which biomes are where in this case. I'm continuing my streak of incompetence in completing lines. I'm not sure where that was unfinished, but I'm just going to assume that I fixed it. And then we'll get a rock and maybe some wheat over there. Okay, so we have this juncture here. In Settlers of Catan, there are, I should probably explain the pieces as well. So there is I'm going to draw this in a color you can see. There is a settlement, which is like a little house. This is going to seem somewhat familiar to like Monopoly with houses and hotels, but the actual gameplay is very different. So there's a settlement. There is a road, which is just a rectangular prism. All these are made out of wood in Catan. There is a city. And so in the base set of Catan, these are the only pieces. Now, you can get expansions to seafarers where there's boats, but if you do choose to get those expansions or play that, I would suggest playing the original first just to get a feel for the game. It's not necessarily required. Playing a expansion like Seafarers is very similar to the original game. So there are these 3 pieces. So let's say we take our first piece, and in the start, we're going to be able to put down 2 settlements. But what it means to put down a settlement is you pick a corner of the hexagon. This is unlike some board games where you would be at the center of a given piece on the board. Here, we work on the edges of these hexagons. So the initial settlement we are going to say is here. I'm just going to draw a rectangle for now, just to keep things simple. So this is your settlement. And then in the beginning, you're also going to be able to put down a road with your settlement. So you'll put down a road in some random direction. Usually you'll pick a direction you want to go in. So you have your settlement, you have your road going off in a direction. And so this is your start. What it means to have a settlement here is that you have a possibility of getting each of these 3 resources. Now, the way you get these resources is by a roll of the dice. So in the beginning, little tabs are going to be put down on these hexagons. Now, some people play where these tabs are flipped up and they spiral out in a alphabetical order based off of something that's on the tab, in order to ensure that there is a good variety and spread of popular numbers. And I'll explain why some numbers are popular in a second. But let's just say we have a 3, a 4, and a 5. And so um, these numbers I've picked are arbitrary for now, but what this means is that, and you'll remember this is clay, this is ore, and this is wheat. So, at the beginning of each person's turn, they roll a pair of dice. So a dice, a die. Sorry, I'm getting them mixed up. A die can give any number between 1 and 6, but when you roll two of them, you can get any number between 2 and 12. The thing is, with one die, there is a equal probability of either or of any of the sides being rolled. But with two dice, there is an uneven chance that the ends of the spectrum will be rolled compared to the middle of the spectrum. Because when you add things together, there are more things that add together to be 7 than there are to be 2 or 12. And so this works out in a nice probability that adds up to 36, because 6 times 6 is 36. But it works out that when you have, well, obviously you can't get 1 with 2 dice, because 1 plus 1 is 2. So you start with 2, you have 12. 7 is the most popular number, and then all the numbers in between are increasingly more significant until it gets to 7, and then it goes back down. And so I drew this somewhat uneven, but just imagine that it's fairly even. So a 3 is worse than a 4 is worse than a 5. And there are obviously better numbers than 5, but in this situation, 5 is the best out of these 3. So if you roll 2 dice and you were to get a 5, this person who has a settlement here would receive 1 wheat card. So later in the game, you can upgrade to this settlement to a city. And so I'm just going to draw an extra component on here. And if you have a city here, that means that anytime one of these numbers is rolled, you get 2 of those commodities. So that's what it means to own that property. What's nice about Catan is that once you're at a given place on the board, nobody can remove those pieces. There aren't any special cards, there aren't any special maneuvers that people can do to knock you off the board. So it's more of a game of who can expand and be more prosperous the fastest, because you want to get to your total of points the fastest. So in the game of Catan, in the original game, you can play to 10, you can play to 12. I usually play to 12. And the reason for this is, since I said in the beginning you're going to start out with 2 settlements, you will it's nice to just get an even number of 10 points that you have to earn on top of that. It does also work out with how many pieces you have to work with, and with some of the extra bonus points you can gain. So this is, like I said, it's going to sound like a lot. If this is something where you're watching this before you actually go to play, definitely playing this game will allow you to learn. The game moves at a slow enough pace in the beginning that you can get a feel for it before you have to start making major decisions that will affect whether you have a chance of winning at the end. So let's say that this person was here. If they want to build another settlement, there is a rule in Catan that the player has to be a new settlement has to be at least 2 sides of a hexagon away from any other settlement or city. So the possible places that this person could build another settlement would be here, 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 or here. Now, obviously, this side is also a possibility because there is three sides in between this city and where this settlement would go. And but if you think about it, if you put a settlement here, this is cutting off the possibility of a third settlement being on this hexagon. Now, you may want to do that, but if this is something where you're isolated and you really like this four, then you really want to capitalize that by putting a settlement here and here, and then building them up to cities, because every time this four is rolled, you would then be getting six ore, if that was what you wanted. So the way that you build a settlement is by first building a road to that spot. So if you have to be two sides away, that means you have to build two roads. So if you wanted to build to this spot, you would have to build a road here and then build the settlement. Now, I say build. The way that you do this is by having the resources necessary for building those things on your turn. So I'm going to clean this to give an explanation of the buildings. Now, when you open up the game of Catan, you're going to have little cardboard pieces, cardboard like slabs that will be the recipes for building these structures. So, like I said, you can have your settlement, you can have your city, and you can have, and that's a terrible city, but and then you have your road. And there's one extra one I'll explain in a second. So these are the actual structures that you can put on the board. A settlement requires one sheep, one wood, one clay, and one wheat. A city requires three ore and two wheat. And a road requires a wood and a clay. A lot of these tend to make sense when you think about it, but some of them are a little interesting, like needing a wheat to build a city. I guess this is to feed the people, the extra people. This makes sense in a village. You would need all of those things, and having wood and clay is pretty straightforward for building a road. So this is the recipe for building those individual structures. And so then once you have those pieces, when it's your turn, you can turn those cards into the bank and use them. And so if you had a wood and a clay, you could turn the wood and the clay into the bank and put down a road where you choose. Now, obviously, there can't be another road there, but if you have a clear path, you can put a road there. There's also a final thing you can buy from the bank, and that is a development card. So I'm just going to say dev card. So these are kind of like the chance cards in Monopoly, in a sense. There's some extra things that go along with them. But so this is the development card. There's a stack of these cards. They should be shuffled before the game, and you will choose one. Now, most of the time, these are going to be knights. And so I'll get to what a knight is in a second, but there's some other special ones. So some of these cards, I believe there is 5 in total in the starter pack. These will just straight up give you a point. So these are really good cards. So you can get, it's kind of like a 1-up. So it's plus 1 point. And so nobody can take that from you. You just have an extra point for the rest of the game. So these are very nice cards, but they're few and far between. There's also a road builder. Not sure why I'm capitalizing some letters and not capitalizing others, but the road builder, when played, allows you to build 2 roads just with no resources. It is the resources required to build 2 roads. There's also a I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's it's essentially a harvest. So um, you this card allows you to get two resources of your choosing on your turn. If anyone knows the name of that, please post that in the chat. I'm drawing a blank, so I'm just going to call it harvest for now. So when you play this card, you get two resources that you choose. So you could technically use this to get a road if you wanted to, but you can use this to also get two pieces of a city or something else like that. And then there's a final one called a monopoly. And so the monopoly takes a little bit more skill, a little bit more charisma. The monopoly card allows you to take all of the cards that anyone has uh, of a given resource. So if someone has been sitting there bragging about how much wheat they have, maybe sticking it in their hat and acting like it's a straw hat or something, I don't know who would do that. Um, then you can play this Monopoly card when it's your turn and say, I want all the wheat. And that person has to give you all their wheat, and so does anyone else that has wheat on the table. Now, once this card is played, that's it. You get all the wheat, but then this card is basically useless at that point. Um, but then you can, if you play it right, you can get a large sum of resources of a certain type in on your turn. So if you had a port, which I'll explain in a bit, that might help you because you could trade those out for things. So I guess I'll go into trading right now. So in the beginning of the game, if you don't have any ports, there will be ports on the board. They are on the perimeter of the large hexagon in somewhat random locations. So there might just be a port there, port there. I don't know. So, but let's say that both of your settlements are in here somewhere, and so you're not touching any of these ports. Um, this means that you can still trade cards in for other cards. This just means that you have a 4-to-1 ratio. So if you, for some reason, had 4 rocks and you wanted 1 wheat, then you could trade all 4 of those in and get the 1 wheat. But then the ports allow you to get a little bit extra. Well, save a little bit extra. So there's two types of ports. There's a 3-to-1, which is exactly what it sounds like compared to the 4-to-1 that you normally have. You get to save an extra card, which is pretty big because resources aren't like Monopoly money where you just have a huge stack of money. The resources, you normally don't have that many cards in your hand. In fact, if you have more than 7 and a 7 is rolled, then problems come up. I'll explain that when I get to explaining the knights. Um, and then there's also 2-to-1s. Now, you may say, why would I go for a 3-to-1 when there's a 2-to-1 on the board? But the reason that these 2-to-1s are here is that there's a catch. These 2-to-1s are very specific to a resource. So let's say this was the clay port. Now these 3-to-1s are just denoted by a question mark, meaning that they're wildcards. You can use whichever resource you want in a 3-to-1 ratio to get another resource. But a clay port will have the symbol of the bricks on the port. And this means that you can only trade clay into the port to get something else out. So this is really good if you have a very high supply of clay coming in from the numbers. Say you had a 6 or an 8 on a clay spot, then those numbers tend to be rolled a lot. So you will be getting a lot of clay, and you can use this port. So there's a specific port for each individual commodity, and then there's also a bunch of 3-to-1s. These come a little bit more into play in Seafarers, which is an expansion, like I said. But in the original game, they are very important because they allow you to expand if you don't have a certain commodity. Say you had a lot of sheep, but you don't have any lumber. Then you could venture out to the sheep port and use your sheep to get the lumber you need. Also, at any point in time, you can trade with the other people at the table. There's a catch to this. You can only trade with the person whose turn it is. So if it's your turn, you can trade with anyone because that person would be trading with the person whose turn it is. But if it's not your turn, let's say it's Johnny's turn, then you can only trade with Johnny. And if Johnny decides to be a lockdown isolationist, then you will not be having a fun time on Johnny's turn. Um, and then there's also some ideas that people tend to take where if someone is about to win, they will enact an embargo on them, and so they never give them the cards that they need when they need them. But what's nice about Catan is there tends to be situations where both people will benefit. Say, I'm trying to get a settlement and you're trying to get a city. Well, for a settlement, I don't really need ore. But for a city, you don't need clay or wood. So if you had clay and wood, you could trade that to me for ore, and we would both be happy. Now this, like I said, does cause some problems late in the game because you can start to negotiate the win before people realize that you're about to win. But um, that takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of charisma. Um, so this is the trading system. And so this is how, if you're having a bad time with a specific resource, you could get that resource, even though at the beginning you didn't start on a hexagon of that resource. So now I should explain the knights and the bonuses and whatnot. So in this game, um, well, first off, I'll explain the points. So like I said, I usually play to 12 points. And so that's kind of just a number that me and my friends have picked and stuck with. So it's what I would suggest you play. If you're looking for a shorter game, you can choose a number like 10. Hell, you could even choose a number like 8 if you're crazy and only want to play for 15 minutes. That's kind of an exaggeration, but this game, playing to 12 minutes on a normal, just straight up baseline set, is about 2 hours long. If you lower this to 10 points, I'd say that would probably guarantee that you cut 15 minutes to 30 minutes off of this. So this could be 1.5 hours. And I have no idea how fast someone could get to 8 points. I've never actually played just to 8, but I don't really keep track of how long it takes. But I would imagine it'd be pretty short because as you get to the end, the board tends to get somewhat crowded, and finding places to put down those pieces becomes a little difficult. So I would imagine this would be a significantly shorter amount of time. So the way that you get points is by putting down settlements and upgrading them to cities. Those are the most obvious ways to get points. So a settlement is worth 1 point. A city is worth 2 points. But so a lot of people think that this is a lot, but you have to remember that when you build a city, you're upgrading the settlement. So the settlement is in a sense removed. So when you upgrade the settlement, you're just gaining 1 point. So this, in a sense, is just an extra point when you build to a city. Now, there's a lot of benefits of building to a city because you get 2 resources from what the city is touching. So these are the regular points. And as I said, there are 5 possible points in the dev cards. And so you could buy development cards. These development cards, I don't think I explained previously, cost a sheep, a rock. I don't know why I'm so bad at writing letters right now. A rock and a wheat. So these are kind of just random, and that makes sense because it's kind of like a chance card. And there's also um, two special ways you can get 2 extra points. So the first one that requires less explanation is the longest road. So the way that you achieve this, because you may say, well, in the start, 1 will be the longest road. They have made up for that by saying you first have to have at least 5 roads in a row. So this means that at any given point, going from one point to another without without going back over the same road piece twice, how many roads do you have? If that's over 5, then technically you start out with the longest road. The way that people can take this from you is they have to have a longer road. This means that if they tie your road, you continue to hold that title until they have a longer road. So if you stay at 5 roads and someone were to get 6 roads, then this would mean that they would take the title from you. So like I said, this gives you 2 bonus points on top of whatever you have. There's also another one called the largest army. And so this one takes a little bit more explanation, but in a sense, it means if you have 3 knights, if you have at least 3 knights, I didn't mean to make that into an arrow. It's supposed to be a greater than 5 and greater than 3, and then I made the arrow anyway. Then you get 2 extra points. It's the same way where if someone were to get 4, then they would take that title from you. So now I'm going to explain the knight cards. So on the board in the desert, there is going to be a little kind of like obelisk shaped thing, and it's supposed to look like a little person, somewhat like a sorry piece. I don't know if you know the game Sorry. I think it has a exclamation mark. I don't know. Don't sue me. This is the knight or the robber. It goes by many names. Robber makes more sense, but you use knight cards to move it, so it's a little confusing. But let's say this is a desert, and knight is a knight. So I'm gonna color that. Where did I not finish it? There. Okay. So like I said, this is the desert, and this is the knight. So the knight is a little gray, spherical, cylindrical shaped piece, and it begins on the desert. What this robber does, and I'm just going to call it a robber, is if it is placed on a person's hexagon, so that means a hexagon that someone's touching, then even if that number is rolled, that person does not get the resources from that hexagon. So this is big if someone is winning and they're getting a lot of resources from a given hexagon, then you could use this robber to stop them from getting those resources. The way that you move this is in 2 situations. So the first situation is that you can roll a 7. 7 is the most popular number. There are no 7s on the board, so 6 and 8 are the best numbers that can be on a given resource. But the number 7 is actually the most statistically possible number when rolling 2 dice. So if you roll a 7, then as I alluded to previously, if you have more than 7 cards, it causes problems. So this means you can't just keep hoarding cards because there's always a random probability that you will have to lose some of those cards. The exact amount of those that you have to lose is half of the cards you have, rounding up. So let's say you had 9 cards in your hand. 9 is greater than 7. So the amount of cards you would have to give back to the bank is 5, because 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. Rounding up is 5. So this goes for any number. If you had 65 cards in your hand for some reason, you would have to give up 33. But that just happens passively. The person who rolls the 7 then has the ability to move this piece. They can move this piece to wherever they want, and initially, when they put the robber on this piece, so if they move this here, and let's say Johnny, the isolationist, has a settlement here, initially when they move the piece here, if Johnny is touching this hexagon, the person who rolled the 7 now has the ability to steal 1 random card from Johnny. Now, if there were to be two people touching this hexagon, then the person who rolled the 7 would then have a choice between those two people. Um, they cannot choose. They cannot steal from both of them, but they can steal from one or the other. Now, this could come into play if one person were to not have cards. They could choose to steal from the other person, um, or if they know that one person tends to get a lot of a specific resource that they need, they would like to play their odds with that person as opposed to the other. So there's some decision making to go on there. The other way that you can move this robber is with a knight card. And so the knight card is just a development card that you buy. By the way, whenever you get a development card, you can't use that card until the next turn. So it's just a way of stopping people from like immediately use. I don't know. It's a good gameplay mechanic to require them to wait. Um, but also, if you have a point card, usually with my friends, we say that you can play that immediately because it is just a point. Nobody can do anything about that. But there are some people who choose to hide their point cards until later and then show that they have 4 extra points and have actually already won. And it's kind of a douche move, but we let it slide. Um, so these knight cards are development cards you can get. And when you get this, you have to wait a turn, but on your next turn or any turn in the future when you still haven't used this card, you can flip this card over so that everyone can see it's a knight card and then and then move this. Now, there isn't the added special effect of rolling a 7, so if people have more than 7 cards, they don't have to discard half, but you can still steal from someone when you put the robber on their piece, on their hexagon. So hold on, I'm going to take a sip of water. It's a long-winded explanation. So, but unlike the other cards in the development card stack, the knight cards serve a purpose after they've been used. So you keep the card face up on your portion of the table, and this becomes your army. So this is where the largest army comes into play. When you have used 3 or more cards, you then have the largest army. And the reason that the largest army is quite significant is because it's very hard to chase people. The reason for this is that you can only use 1 development card per turn. So if someone were to have a constant source of development cards, their probability of getting knight cards is very high, so they can continually get knight cards. And if someone were to say, I want to get the largest army from that person, they would also need to get development cards. But if the other person continues to play a knight card every turn, then there is no way to catch up to that person. And especially if they have a significant advantage on you. So it's something that if you do want to chase, you need to start chasing early. But it can take up a lot of your resources. So that is the general idea of the gameplay. So there are a lot of things that can go on. There's some special cases where, so with the longest road obviously is in a straight line how many sides you are occupying without going over the same road piece twice. But there is a special case where another person can come and put a settlement on your road because the roads are only on the sides and the settlements are on the corner. So if someone comes in from this direction and puts a settlement here, the ruling of the game is that this breaks the road into 2 pieces. There's discontinuity here. But the one thing is that if there's a settlement, you cannot build a road through it, but someone can build a road on your settlement. Someone can build a settlement on your road. So I'll repeat that because I messed it up. If there is a settlement in the way, you cannot build a road through it. But if there's a road in the way, you can build a settlement on that road. Just to make that clear. And so this is important late game. If someone were winning, you could actually remove 2 points from their score by breaking up their longest road. Now, obviously, getting a settlement is pretty substantial, so it may be difficult to do that, but it's an option. Um, there's also sort of a house rule. I'm not sure how official it is that me and my friends tend to play with, which is the idea that if you have nothing to do on your turn, not that you can't do anything, but there's nothing that you want to do on your turn, you can use that entire turn to move one road piece. The only side note on that is you can't isolate a settlement. So if there were a road here and there's no other roads connected to this, Johnny can't take this and move it to his other settlement over here, because this would then isolate this guy here, and that's a no-no. So that's just the rule. And the reason that this is important is because if you sort of spider-webbed out, but then you want to have the longest road, you could reorganize your roads over a long period of time, and it would make a longer road within that orientation. Also, if you don't have the resources, because of where you are, you could actually move your road to a spot where you could build a settlement to get more resources. So this it's a nice game mechanic. So you can decide whether that's important to you or not. I'm seeing that I'm pushing on an hour already, and I want to make sure that I get my last section in. But if there's any questions before I move on to the next section, or anything you think I've forgotten, please let me know. But I'm just trying to think. So what's nice about this game is that it's it has a very finite length of time. So it's pretty solid on 2 hours. If you get the upgrade to Seafarers, it expands the board. It adds on about another half hour. If you get the upgrade to include more people, that would bring the total of players from 4 to 6. Then it actually adds on another half hour. So if you have both Seafarers and the expansion for 6 people, that means that it should be about a 3 hour game. But when you compare that to other games that are popular of this type, like Risk or Monopoly, with those games, they tend to drag on and people tend to quit by the end of it. What's nice about Catan is it tends to have an end in sight. So there isn't any possibility of creating a self-sustaining ecosystem where people keep losing and gaining just enough to survive. Catan, because there's no ebb and flow, it's all progress or lack thereof. Um, Everybody is progressing towards the end goal, so eventually someone will hit the end goal. Um, so that's why I love this game, and I've been playing this with my friends at college for a while. I was actually introduced to this by my high school chemistry teacher, who required us to play at least once as a grade, and I have been playing ever since. So I want to thank everyone who's been watching so far. I know this has been somewhat of a long-winded explanation, but I'm going to move into my final section, which is my random drawing. So get hype. I'm going to clean this off and definitely take a breather because this has been a long explanation. So I'm just going to get everything ready.